It is the Titan submersible disaster. 9 months later, guys, this was a huge story last summer. I was doing a video a day, probably for about 2 or 3 weeks straight. And then, of course, news fizzles out. I wanted to give an update here. Almost a year has passed since the implosion, since the disaster. The investigations are still ongoing. There was a recent revelation that was revealed via a documentary, and I'm going to be discussing that and kind of updating everyone on the news. There's really not a lot that's come out. Now, when we left this story late last summer, we were thinking it was going to be a very long investigation and of truly finding the cause of the implosion, and they're still investigating it. It's still probably going to take at least a few more months, but you can see the recent stuff that's come out. Banging sound from Titan sub-search heard for first time in new documentary clip. And there were questions, was James Cameron going to do a documentary on this? Those, of course, were immediately proven to be false, but it does seem like people are getting around to doing videos on the Titan sub. The audio, which was not previously released to the public, was given to the producers by the Canadian Air Force team that led the search and rescue mission for 5 people aboard the sub. And this audio apparently was not the original audio that was leaked. If you guys remember, there was a bunch of stuff that was leaked about potential transcripts of them communicating with the Coast Guard, with the rescuers on what was happening aboard the sub, and they were banging on the sub. Apparently, at least the banging part is true, and these people were able to get it from the Air Force, and you hear it in the documentary. I cannot play that, obviously, because they probably just copyright it, but you can see it on Twitter or on YouTube or somewhere else, I'm sure. It's not like that you're going to hear any screams or anything, it's just bangs. Reports of rescuers hearing a knocking sound while searching for the sub emerged on the second day of the 4-day search and were confirmed on day 3. Another thing I wanted to discuss was the idea that the U.S. Coast Guard had already known that the sub had imploded, you know, even during the search. And the reason apparently the search went on, and the reason that the search went on and all of us were led to believe that, oh, this was a dramatic rescue attempt for a lost submersible at the bottom of the ocean, is because the U.S. government and the Coast Guard didn't want the technology that they had to be leaked, because apparently they knew right away. Now, you would think that, well, if this banging is coming out, that's not true. Well, if you look, U.S. Navy official at the time told CBS News the analysis of the banging noises determined they were likely ocean noise or sounds coming from other ships, but they're still releasing them. So, you know, I'm not a big fan of them releasing this and insinuating that these were actually the bangs unless some other stuff comes out, because the timeline really doesn't make sense. The idea is that the ship imploded before the search even began, and they went along with the search even after it was imploded, and they knew that it had imploded. So it's kind of weird that they would release that Titan sub bang that led to bangs that led to hope of crew survival heard for first time. Well, I guess if you're gonna, you know, say it like that, you can kind of get away with doing it. Well, these were the bangs that aren't coming from the Titan sub crew. You know, it seems very similar to the ones that were leaked right when the search was happening. So I don't know, are these different bangs? I just don't find this very interesting. It's just thumping you here at the bottom of the ocean. Audio of the noises detected during the search for the Titan submersible that prompted hope of the crew survival has been released as part of a new documentary. So the bangs evidently were not the crew, but it makes for a good story. It makes for a good headline when you're releasing a documentary, I guess. Either way, that's just an update on Titan. The investigation is still ongoing. I'll be honest, there's been virtually no news on the investigation recently. If you look at the headlines, I'm guessing at some point there's going to be stuff that comes out. We knew it was going to take a while. You would think it would have already came out. But I think in general, most people know what's going to be happening here in terms of this investigation. Remember, Stockton Rush had been pressed on the carbon fiber hull The reason he did it was to cut costs and fit more people. He wanted to turn this into a business, and the only way to do that, because of how long these submersible dives take if you're going to the Titanic, it's such a niche thing, but there's enough demand there. If you can make a submersible big enough, which the carbon fiber hull allowed him to do, you can fit more people down there, and having 5 people go down, because remember, they're including Stockton Rush, and they're also including, you know, like an expert on the Titanic, and the idea of having like a tour guide. You would be getting 3 extra people instead of maybe 1 or 2. It's going to help you immensely in terms of your bottom line and making more money and making it a profitable business. So he goes with the carbon fiber hull. There's been multiple reports, even within the last few months, that have come out about people warning Stockton Rush, saying, look, this isn't smart. And of course, if you go back to that time period in 2021, 2022, all of the trips in 2020 were canceled, I guess, with the pandemic and all of that. But Stockton Rush didn't want to hear any of it, you know, dating all the way back to 2019, 2018, when the Titan was, you know, designed and put into action and used. Everything was going accordingly. Everything was going fine. And you think these people that are trying to protect you, they're just doing it as a precautionary measure. You know, you're an explorer. It's annoying. But unfortunately, when it comes to something like that, yeah, everything's going fine until an implosion happens. And then within milliseconds, you're all dead. And that's exactly what happened. That's why these precautions need to be taken seriously, especially with something like this. And you would think, I mean, my goodness, how many people are doing this, going that deep into the ocean? It's a very rare thing. There would be some type of, you know, stiffer regulations when it comes to doing that, and not tempting fate and cutting corners, if you will, by trying to make the cabin bigger to enable more people to go down there to make more money, and you know, in terms of how many people you can fit, tourists you can fit per trip. That's what I think is going to come out. It's going to come out that, yes, the design was faulty. People said it was faulty, and Rush went with it anyways, and it was working until it didn't work. And unfortunately, when it doesn't work and you're doing something like this, which is absurdly dangerous, there is no margin for error. It's just over for everyone on board, and that's exactly what happened to the Titan submersible. So that is the recent update. They released the banging noises, but honestly, the bangs just sound, it sounds like the same thing that was released back in late June when this story originally broke. And again, those banging noises are not thought to be the crew. The idea is the implosion happened before. It wasn't like this 2 or 3 day thing where Stockton Rush was at the bottom of the ocean saying, help, help, help. No. The implosion just happened. It just happened pretty much immediately, and then they did the whole search thing, and supposedly the U.S. had already known, but they had technology that they didn't want other nations to know about in terms of picking up sounds in the ocean, so they went along with the search, and that's why it became this big drama fest in terms of the public wondering if they're going to be able to rescue these people at the bottom of the ocean, possibly around the Titanic, you would think. But of course, it never got to that point where they were at the Titanic. The implosion happened before that. And I guess when it comes to this investigation, I would just like to know the full timeline. Did they actually know immediately and just say, we're going along with the search because this is sensitive technology that we have and we don't want to disclose it? Maybe that's false. Maybe they were down there. I think it's just the timeline's a little bit cloudy. We were 90% sure on what happened. We think it imploded basically immediately. There wasn't this, you know, multi-day or even multi-hour search or anything like that. They had the search because they didn't want to disclose the technology, even though the sub they knew was already imploded based off of the things that they were reading from the bottom of the ocean. Or maybe it's a situation where they're like, well, there might be a 5% chance the sub actually isn't imploded. We don't know for sure, so let's go along with the search anyways. The investigation could unveil possibly that, to where they were almost 100% sure that the sub had imploded, but they didn't know. Of course, the public was led to believe that no, the situation was unfolding as the submersible was stuck at the bottom of the ocean, somewhere around the Titanic, presumably, because they were on an expedition to go to the Titanic, and they were trying to rescue them, which obviously is completely false, but, you know, that's just the public knowledge that we had at the time. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.